Hello and welcome to this video series on Introduction to R and RStudio. This is video 1 of a 3-part video series. In this series, we're going to discuss what is R and RStudio, explain where to download and how to download R and RStudio, talk about the RStudio environment, edit and recode data, run different statistical tests, create some visualizations, and then go over how to save the results outside of R. In video 1 specifically, we're going to cover an overview of the data scenario, discuss what R and RStudio is and how to download these, provide an overview of the RStudio environment, go over the foundations of the R language, create some objects, explain what a package is, and then how to install and activate them. So, to get started, R is an open source statistical program. And we go a little bit more detail first within that. So, it's a programming language and environment for statistical computing and graphics. It is open source, and it's very similar to the S language, an environment developed at Bell Laboratories, formerly AT&T, and now Lucent Technologies, by John Chambers and colleagues. R has a variety of statistical, both linear and nonlinear modeling, classical statistical tests, Bayesian statistical tests, time series analysis, classifications, cluster analysis, machine learning, etc., as well as graphical techniques. It is highly extensible what it can do. Now, R has a lot of things that are kind of built into it for functionality, but a big advantage of R is that it can work with what's called a package. A package is a set of different functions that you can import into R into your session. When you activate it, those functions or macros become active, which gives you much more versatility. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to give you an overview of the data scenario, and then we're going to go and talk about how to download and install R and RStudio. So in this scenario, we're interested in studying the relationship between the amount of corruption in a country and the quality of their economy. For this question, we're lucky that data already exists. We'll be using the World Development Indicators Dataset, or WDI, which is compiled annually by the World Bank. We'll be using a dataset from a past year that we've simplified, but you can find the full dataset at World Bank's website. We're also lucky because World Bank saves the data in a way that makes it easy to open and run analysis compared to older data like census data, which can take a lot of effort to transform into a usable format. And of course, there's no guarantee that someone else has created the dataset you want in advance. Often, the first step in the data project is to spend a lot of time thinking about the values and variables needed and then create the data that you need. Within the WDI dataset, we're going to focus on the variables corrupt and GDPPC. Corrupt is an index of perceived corruption within a country's government. The data we're using is country-level aggregated data, but within each country, citizens were surveyed and asked questions like, what do you need to plan bribes to start a local business? Note that corruption is reverse coded, so that higher scores equal lower perceived corruption, and it ranges from 0 to 10. The second variable is gross domestic product per capita, or GDPPC, which indicates how well the economy is doing scaled for the population size of a country. For example, it might not be very interesting to note that Botswana produces less than Brazil overall, but it might be interesting to note that Botswana produces more per citizen than Brazil, and then more than Brazil in 2014. Note that in using variables from the WDI dataset, we've given the conceptualization and operations of these variables to the World Bank. We've also allowed dynamic concepts to become simple numbers. However, this allows us to move quicker into later stages of analysis. So, how to get R in RStudio. Now, you can use base R, but it's not as user-friendly. So I recommend RStudio. It gives you a little bit more of a better interface to work off of. So if you go to r.cran-projects.org, this is CRAN, the Comprehensive R Network. You can download this on Linux, Mac, or Windows. I'm running on a Windows, so I can go ahead and click on that and then install R for the first time. And then download R. This is the version that we're going to be using today. Every couple of months there's a new version that comes out. So if you go ahead and download that, you want to download it, install it first, and then we're going to install the interface to work off of R. To do that, we're going to go to rstudio.com, click on Products, Open Source RStudio. Now we're going to go ahead, if you click on RStudio on the desktop, we're going to want the open source edition, download it, and then choose which version. We're going to choose the R Desktop open source license, and then you can choose how you want, which operating system you're using for this. If you're using a Chrome OS, there are also information such as installing R in RStudio on a Chromebook that walks you through the process of being able to do that. So once you've installed R, then go ahead, download and install RStudio. And then when you open up RStudio, it's already linked together. Now I do want to mention a couple of helpful resources. The first one is r4ds.had.co.nz. This is the homepage for R for Data Science. This is a completely online book by Garrett and Hadley Wickham that walks through everything from how to get started with R to data visualization, working with data, creating functions, analyzing data. It's phenomenal, and it is completely free. R in RStudio will always be free as well. You can also do things like look up R, how to run a multiple regression. And there are tons of tutorials to get you started with different analysis. Oftentimes, Googling it might be the best solution when you're first learning R. There's things like Stack Exchange, Stack Overflow, where if you run into an error message, you can kind of see how others have solved it. And finally, I would recommend following We Are Our Ladies. We Are Our Ladies is a worldwide organization to promote gender diversity in the R community. R is an extremely inclusive community, and highly recommend it. Each week they have a curator that walks through different ways of using R, from different suggestions on code and tutorials, the whole 9 yards. It's just a wonderful, wonderful organization. So I'm going to go ahead and minimize this. On my desktop, I have my data set, and I have my R syntax. I'll open up the data set in Excel really quick just to show you what it looks like. This is a tidy format. It's also in wide format. So each country is a row. It's only listed once. It's also cross-sectional data. Each column is a variable. Each variable starts with a letter and can have a number in it, but it can't start with one, and no special characters. We also have missing here too. We're not going to talk about missingness. However, R has a lot of functionality in terms of multiple imputation and other ways of handling missing data. So what I do now is going to open up RStudio and become familiar with this. So this is RStudio. I'm going to make a quick adjustment to the visual. Make it a little bit easier to read. So this is the basic console. We have R, so it's actually running base R in this console window. So it's telling you the version number, the platform, and other information. This is the environment window. So whenever we create an object, it's going to be shown here. An object can be a number of things. It could be a single value. It could be a list. It could be a text or a word. It could be output results from a regression. It could be a data frame. It could be multiple data frames. An object is whatever you assign it to be. There's also things like a shortcut to import data. You can also do things like you can pull up different files, plots, the different packages, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. The help files. So if you're interested in learning how to use a specific type of function. There's also another new tab in RStudio in this newer version of tutorials. They can actually go through these tutorials and learn how to use filter observations, learn how to make summary tables. This is a new feature in the newest version. So what we're going to do first is we're going to actually open up our code. So I'm going to go to File, open file, and on my desktop, I'm going to locate my rintro2020.r code. So this is our syntax. If you write things in the console window, just like as if it was data, it doesn't save it. So it's always good to practice to write syntax. That way you have record of everything and you can rerun things quickly. Everything with this pound symbol signifies that it's a comment. Notice how it's greened out here. And this will also depend on which version of the background you're using. So again, everything that starts with this symbol is going to be a comment, and R knows not to use that. If you have 4 hyphens at the end of a line, that's going to create a section break. So if you click here, these segmented lines, these are all the different section breaks that we have, noting a new content or a new topic. Now, I'm of the mindset to have heavily annotated code. This makes it easier to remember why I did what I did, and makes it more portable, so then I can go ahead and send this to another researcher, and there's a track record of everything I did and why that walks through this process. What we're going to do first is we're going to create an object now. So we're going to create an object called X, and R is cap sensitive. We're using the assignment symbol, which is the less than hyphen. So this arrow is assigning the value of 5 to an object called X. Now you can either highlight the entire line of code and then click on Run, or click on the cursor so it's at the end of it and click on Run. It does the same exact thing. Essentially saying X is an object that contains the value of 5. Now if we go ahead and type in X and then run that line of code, in our console window, it's going to go ahead and print out 5. We can also remove an object using the rm function, the remove function. So when we type out rm parentheses, then we're saying, have to say what the object is, then end parentheses. We're removing this specific object. When I do that, notice how it goes away in the environment. We can also create an object that contains multiple things, sometimes called a vector or a list. So we're going to create an object called y, and we're going to use the C to denote that there are multiple values within this object. And each value is separated by a comma. So when I run that, now we have y. R is determined that it's a numeric. It goes 1 to 4, and these are the values, a preview of 1, 2, 3, 4. We can also run line 39, and now print out the object there. We can also, oops, typo. We can also use things like text or characters, which is a string of characters here, hi, hey, hello, and assigning that to an object called z. Here we have the object z, it's a character, and there's 3 values, and there's the preview. What we can also do is we can work with data frames. So we're going to create 3 separate vectors or lists, and we can combine them into a data set, or a data frame, as what's called in R. So we're going to go ahead and have name in our list of names, age, and sex. Now what we're going to do then is we're going to go ahead and take our 3 vectors, and we're going to use a function called data.frame, listing all 3 vectors, and that's going to collapse that into a data frame. Specifically, the first value of each list, R is assuming that's that single person's information. So that's how it's recognized. It's not using any other sort of union within this, or matching. It's just assuming based on position. So when we do this, rather than a value, we have something called data. Person.data, which is our object. There's 4 observations of 3 variables. If you click on this little blue icon under environment, it expands, it lists each of the different variables and the types. We can also have it print out by running 57, or if we use the view function and then refer to the object, that's going to open up a new tab with the data frame. What we can also do is if you want to refer to a specific variable within a data frame, you use the $sign. So let's say we want to specifically reference sex of the variable within the data frame person.data. We essentially want R to print out all the values for this variable within this data frame. When we do that, there's our specific values. We can also add a new variable into a data frame much the same way. So what we can do then is we can say, okay, we want to add school. So if we refer to our data frame object, we're going to create a new variable called school. So person.data $school, and we're going to assign this vector to that. So I'm going to go ahead and run that, and then go ahead and click on and run 71. Now we have school here. If in the console window I type in view person.data, there's our data frame. We can also do things like help.search. And when we do that, that's going to pull up the help files associated with that. We can scroll down and find the specific one that we're interested in looking at, or we can also do, so utilities, there's the view, data view, and all the information associated with that too. Let's go ahead and remove everything. The nice feature is RStudio has also just added a spell check file. So as I'm going around, I'm seeing a bunch of spell mistakes, and I'm going to update this. So when you download the code, it's actually going to be fully corrected. So what I do now is you could do it this way. You can also press, it'd be Command L for Mac, or press Control L. That's going to go ahead and clear this console window too. So let's talk a little bit about packages. Again, like we mentioned, packages are a collection of different functions that you can install and then activate for your session. So think of a package as going to the library and taking out the book. Now, whenever you want to open that book to get the information out of, you can do it that way. So install.packages, that's getting the book and downloading it and bringing it home. So we're downloading this from CRAN, and there's over 20,000 different R packages that have been vetted by CRAN, so there's no malicious code. They do not test the mathematical formulas though, but they've been vetted, and then you can go ahead, download it, and use it. The nice thing too with the different packages is, let's say I wanted to learn about the arm is a good package. I can go ahead and click on description file. It has information on it, or let's see, I can go ahead and let's do Bayesian. So each package is required to have a user guide, examples of the functions, vignettes, and other documentation. So I can go ahead and I'll pull up the HTML. So it has all the information like averaging posteriors, and I can actually pull that information. The nice thing too with this is we can go back to Google, and I'll type in R best. This is Bayesian estimation. In order to be on R, they all have to have a reference manual. This has all the different functions, explains what the function is, what the code will look like, and then we'll also have example code that walks you through how to run it. So here's examples, as well as example data sets to run this. There's also vignettes that walk you through, or sometimes these are papers, and they walk you through step by step how to go about through the whole process of running the analyses or using the functions. Every single CRAN package must have that. So what I do now is I'm going to install a couple of packages. You only need to install once, and then you never have to do it again unless you update. But every time you want to use those functions, you always have to use a library command. And that's going to say activate these functions. So I'm going to install vcd extra, and now I'm going to activate it. Now when I activate it, it's going to load the dependencies. And if I scroll down in my package list, all the way down, next to vcd extra, it's checked. You can also do things like check it here. It's going to do the same thing. There's multiple ways to do the same exact thing in R. We're going to go ahead and install psych, car, lmtest, yhat, and APA tables for this session. Now I already have all of these downloaded, so it might have an error message pop up like this. If this happens, click on no for now. And notice when it's running, it has that little stoplight symbol. So you can't run anything else until that's finished. And now that this is blue here and we don't see that stop sign, now we're good to go. I'm going to go ahead and activate all 5 of these packages now. Sometimes there's conflicts, so it might overwrite some of the different functionality, but that's okay. So we're going to end the session here for this video, and we'll pick back up and we'll import some data and then run some analyses. I'll see you in the next video.